are back after a brief coffee break, and I will begin with by introducing our panelists in order of their presentations. Unfortunately, Julieta Suárez Cao was not able to attend this presentation, but we send her warm regards. We will start this second panel with Stephanie Allenda and Rodrigo Medel's presentation. You can take 20 minutes, and when you have 1 minute left, I will show you this card. So you can start wrapping up your ideas, and we can move on the next presentation. Stephanie and Rodrigo, are you there? Are you ready? Yeah, I can see Stephanie.
Sorry. I'm ready. I will start. So
great. We will wait for Rodrigo. That way he can start to show your presentation.
Yes.
Rodrigo, I will send him a quick message.
He's got the presentation, so.
Well, Stephanie Allenda is a professor of political sociology and research director on education and social science faculty at the Andrés Bello University in Chile. And Rodrigo Medel is also researcher at the Andrés Bello University. The presentation of Stephanie and Rodrigo is titled, Why Do Some Choose the Radical Right? An Analysis of Ideological Differences by Gender in Chile. Very interesting. Rodrigo, the floor is yours. Ahí está. Yeah.
Hi, sorry.
Rodrigo, you are showing the slides, aren't you? Or
okay. Here I go.
Well, I'll start.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I want to express my gratitude for the invitation to this workshop, and also I want to congratulate the new board of the CPS, especially Lucia Miranda, Maricel Rodriguez, Casi, for organizing it. During our presentation, my co-author Rodrigo Medel and I will be sharing preliminary results and analysis focusing on the role of gender in supporting the radical right in Chile, particularly José Antonio Cast's Republican Party, which splits from the conventional right UDI, Independent Democratic Union, in 2019. Our data is derived from the first Polarization survey conducted in Chile involving a sample of 3,000 individuals, which allowed us to analyze and compare the electoral support basis of both party families on a range of issues. The politicization of gender is a key feature of the radical right around the world. No, it's Rodrigo, it's the, yes. Around the world, turning gender into a focal point of what has been studied as a cultural war in various countries. This phenomenon has different characteristics depending on its intensity in society. In different Latin American countries, there are anti-gender campaigns aimed at countering gender ideology. This has been studied in relation to Bolsonaro in Brazil, a country historically influential in exporting the Christian right, fostering religious thinkers, leaders, and activists who influence the rest of the world. In Chile, since April 2022, Republican Party founder José Antonio Cast has led the political Network for Values, which aims to impede the progress of minority rights. Its 2017 program also proposed reversing the current abortion law, which has only decriminalized pregnancy termination in case of rape, danger to the mother's life, and fetal inviolability. Similar positions characterize, as we well know, other expressions of the far right in the world, such as Vox in Spain. The study of the ultra-right in Latin America is still fragmentary. Little is known about their singularities and whether it is appropriate to apply typologies developed in the North, such as the concept of a fourth wave proposed by Cas Mather. Regarding this aspect, in their recent book, The Rise of the Radical Right in Global South, Piñero, Machado, and Vargas Maya suggest that in Latin America, the opposition against gender and sexual rights could be much more intense and consequently more harmful than in the North. Recent research also suggests that far-right party factions are being integrated into the mainstream due to their increasing acceptance by mainstream right-wing and sometimes even left-wing parties for potential coalitions. Furthermore, radical right-wing ideas are openly discussed in mainstream circles and their policies are being adopted, albeit in a somewhat more moderate form by mainstream parties. This phenomenon aligns with one of the characteristics of the fourth wave, as described by Mather. Therefore, we are interested in this paper in examining whether we can observe differences between the electoral bases of both parties or both party families regarding gender issues. Next, please. Sorry, I'm a bit allergic. So I've got this issue, health issue, little problem. One of our hypotheses is that support for the radical right can be explained by a cultural backlash. This cultural backlash is a reaction to the gradual rise of post-materialist values, such as environmental protection, peace movements, sexual liberalization, democracy, human rights, gender equality, cosmopolitanism, and respect for the rights of homosexuals, immigrants, handicapped people, and ethnic racial minorities, as opposed to materialist values focused on economic and physical security. Are these factors predominant in explaining the vote for the Republican Party in Chile? The question is relevant because recent studies on Europe and Latin America show an increase in materialistic factors that explain the support for radical right. In both Europe and the United States, this support reflects the insecurity experience in certain rural areas, for example, due to the perceived decline in material well-being, not just in non-material aspects. So next slide, please. Our main questions are, or is, why, no, next, the anterior, yeah. Our main question is, why do certain individuals, especially based on gender, choose to vote for the radical right instead of the conventional right? And our key variables are economic views, cultural and moral values, gender differences in these perspectives. Next slide, please. Before Rodrigo, no, the masculinization, yes. Before Rodrigo begins presenting our main findings, the following slides, this slide, shows that the Republican Party is the most male-dominated of all the Chilean parties, as indicated by the composition of the party membership. We will explore in our results whether this could be an indicator of a more anti-feminist stance. Rodrigo, I'll leave you the floor.
Thank you, Stephanie. Just like Stephanie said, we're working with the Polarization National Survey, the first Polarization National Survey, which has a lot of questions regarding attitudes towards towards gender, political attitudes, etc. And one of our most notable findings is that the voters of the radical right and conventional right show this substantial alignment on economic issues. Both groups favor policies that promote economic growth, for example, limit government intervention, and both groups advocate for lower taxes. There are no big differences between gender regarding these issues. So this is particularly important when we consider political alliance, for example. But however, this raises the question, If economic issues do not drive the distinction, then what does? And the answer, at least from our data, is on cultural and identity-based values. While we observe some economic consensus, value-based divergences are striking. Like radical right voters express strong opposition to abortion. Both men and women, a clear rejection on feminist movements, and robust support for other issues like weapons or gun ownership. These moral and cultural divergences reflect a broader ideological battle over the direction of the Chilean society. These are other value-based divergences, like the radical right, anti-feminist and conservative stance on social issues suggests that their support is not only a rejection to economic conditions, but also a reactionary response to perceived threat posed by progressive values. And we think that what's particularly interesting is how gender plays a crucial role in these ideological differences. Among men, those who support the radical right, we found a pronounced endorsement of anti-feminist sentiments, which is not as strong in females. These men also show higher support for policies promoting traditional gender roles, which aligns with the radical right broader opposition to progressive gender policies. Women who support the radical right, on the other hand, while less vocal on these issues, still align with some of them, like anti-abortion stances, but also shows strong support for issues like unrestricted use of weapons, especially when it comes to self-defense, and that's significantly different than women from the conventional right. So this signals that radical right supporting women, law and order issues may outweigh feminist concerns, which complicates simplistic assumptions that all women should naturally align with feminist or progressive politics. So to better, these are other findings that due to the time limits, I'm gonna skip, because to better understand these dynamics, we conducted two logistic regression analyses, one for men and one for women, focused on explaining radical right voting, not affiliation. There's an error. It's radical right voting. We control for variables like age, socioeconomic status, and religion, while our dependent variable measure whether voters identify with voted for the radical right or for the conventional right. So in general terms, this first plot is for men and women. The results underscore the idea that cultural and identity issues far outweigh economic concerns when explaining why people voted for radical right instead of conventional right? So both men and women opposition to abortion was a strong predictor, a strong and significant prediction of radical right voting. However, when we dig a bit deeper, we see certain issues resonate more strongly by gender. These are two plots. One, the left one is for men, the right one is for women. We also see that both for men and women, opposition to abortion emerged as a significant predictor, right? But the intensity of support for other key issues differ. For instance, women show a higher, these are transformed for odds ratio in terms of interpretation. Women showed a higher odds ratio for the unrestricted police use of weapon variables, suggesting a strong affinity for police, emphasizing public safety and law enforcement. And this is particularly interesting when we consider that women in general are more likely to prioritize issues like health and welfare. For radical right supporting women, those security concerns appear to override these traditional gender priorities. Again, pointing to like a more complex negotiation of identity and issue salience between the radical right. Also, looking at the specific variables for gender, the data also supports or suggests that men in the radical right are significantly more likely to support anti-feminist stances and promote traditional values regarding family and gender roles. On the other hand, while women align with radical right on issues like abortion and police force, their political identity seems to be shaped by a broader set of security concerns, indicating a sort of different pathway to radical right support compared to men. Some preliminary conclusions. Our findings suggest that while economic preference between radical right and conventional rights voters are similar, it is the moral and identity-based issues that create a deep divide between these two groups. These gender differences are critical to understanding the radical right's political identity in Chile. And these findings also have support, we think we have support implications for understanding potential political alliances in Chile, as the radical right, cultural conservatism may prevent coalitions with a more economically focused conventional right. So some discussions on future research as we move forward. It will be essential to explore whether these gender dynamics of radical right sports are presented in other regions, particularly in the global south. The rise of the radical right, driven by a mix of cultural backlash and identity politics, has long-term implications for political landscape, we think not only in Chile. And we want to thank you for your attention. We would like now to open the floor for discussions, and you can find there our contact information. Thank you.
Lucia, on t'entend pas. We cannot hear you because of the micro.
Now, sorry, yeah.
It's okay. So
we was. Thank you, Maricel. Thank you. I was saying that Stephanie and Rodrigo perfectly fit the time. And well, the next presentation is on Maria Esperanza Casulo, research director at the CONICET in Argentina and professor of political science at the National University of Rio Negro, Argentina. Maria Esperanza is one of international guests. Thank you for being here. Maria Esperanza presentation is titled Ideological Gender Gap in Argentina, Implications and Future Research. Maricel?
Okay, thank you so much to Lucia for putting together this wonderful panel. And I also want to congratulate on the new ascension to the chair in the Political Science Research Committee of International Political Science Association. I think also this panel was put together with assistance from that, financial assistance from that committee, and I think we can invite everybody that is listening to go and check out the Political Sociology Committee at IPSA and ISA and become a member. I'm a director of a small research center. I'm not a director of CONICET. And also it wouldn't be, a good with the cats at CONICET now. I think there would be protests if I were one of the leading members of the CONICET, which I'm not, I'm just a researcher. Okay, so without further, and also I want to apologize because my presentation today is in a more preliminary states that all of the other presentations, so maybe it's going to be less organized. I can just say as an excuse that I have come to this topic recently. My main line of research is regular populism. The thing is, with the rise of right-wing populism throughout the globe, you have to write about gender just because gender, as I think we've listened in several of the presentations, is so primary and central to right-wing populist discourse. And of course, this is going to be about Milei in Argentina, which I don't know if you, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to go back to that. And the interesting thing is that there is a consensus of the existence of a strong gender gap in not only in voting, but in ideological preferences in Argentina. And this has been going on for some time, but this really came to the fore with the election of Javier Milei. So Argentina is probably one of the most extreme outlier cases of ideological voting and gender gap. And these are two charts that are from Paola Subán's article on Milei's structure of support. And you can see that this is an interesting chart because it's longitudinal, and you can see that throughout 2022 and 23, the bulk of support for Milei, like the core of support, are men, and women have a less favorable view of Milei. It doesn't mean that some women didn't vote for Milei. Of course, they did. Milei won on the second round with 55% of the vote. But there's always been a higher degree of support for Javier Milei. And the core of Javier Milei's coalition are young men between 16 and 25. This is just an example of one survey, but every political survey in Argentina has found with some differences. Some people estimate that the voting gap is 10%. Some estimate that the voting gap is 19%. But there's an absolute consensus that there is a gender voting gap and that young men are the base of support of Javier Milei. In fact, if young men had voted differently, just with that group, Milei wouldn't be president, probably. And the opposite is also true. The core of the opposition to Javier Milei are women, not necessarily the age, according to most of the surveys that I've seen, not necessarily very young women, more of women of reproductive age, between 30 and 45 years old. And this is, on one hand, this is not surprising because as I think that Rocío made the case very well, is that the anti-gender discourse in Milei's campaign, and even before he was a presidential candidate, was very clear. And it's important to also mention that once he was elected, he really has taken over a kind of extreme anti-gender agenda. In a country like Argentina, in which the advancement of gender rights has been somewhat transversal, between cross-cutting between the political forces of the previous presidents, even the Cambiemos government and the Cristina Fernández de Kirchner's government and Alberto Fernández, Milei is setting up to dismantle some of the most prominent gender politics. In the OIS and in the UN, his representatives have denounced the so-called 2030 agenda, They very recently voted with North Korea, Iran, Russia, Syria against the Pact of the Future. They didn't went as far as to delegalize abortion, which was legalized in Argentina in 2020. But what they did was they just defunded all the public systems, the systems of support for people being able to access abortion in public hospitals. And they also defunded one program that was actually created by the Mauricio Macri's government, so a kind of a more moderate center-right government that was very successful in cutting back teenage pregnancies in Argentina. Argentina cut teenage pregnancies by 50% in the last 10 years, and that program is completely inexistent now. And they also closed down or defunded the anti-gender violence telephonic helpline, etc., etc. What I have been researching for some years now is that the identification, and I think this also connects with what Rocio was saying, when you interview Milei's voters, they don't necessarily identify with every single item in his policy, menu. But especially for this group of young men, which I didn't mention that the group of young men is very class cross-cutting. Young men of all classes have identified with Milei in some percentage. When you talk to these voters, the identification is much more with the kind of performance of aggression that Milei performs constantly, much more so than in the policies. In fact, as Rocio was very, very well describing, if you ask them, do you support eliminating the sexual education campaign? No. But, I like him. I think that he's a strong guy, that he shows there's a certain performance of aggression and dominance. And the interesting thing is that the uses of rhetorical images of sexual aggression are a specific recurrent point in Javier Milei's sexual aggression against women and other people. And you can see this once he became president. These are some examples of Milei's organized campaign of harassment against a female singer, pop star, Lali Esposito, which the night that Milei won the election, she posted on Instagram, "This is very sad, this is very dangerous." That's all she said. From that moment on, the president of Argentina has tweeted and retweeted constantly against this one private citizen. The interesting thing is that there were other young male pop artists that also criticized Milei, and he has never organized this kind of retweet campaign with his followers. It's very, very clear that this is gendered, these campaigns of harassment. This is a picture of a political rally that Milei did, I think, 1 week ago. And I don't know if you can see Milei. It's right here in the middle, but the really interesting thing that I wanted to show is that the sea of faces of his followers are probably 99% men, right? Young men. So, and the interesting thing, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but if you analyze Milei's discourse, the interesting thing is that this performance of aggression is combined with what I call the loser messiah model, in which Milei displays aggression and dominance, but also constructed around a personal narrative of having been wounded and rejected and alone when he was a kid, when he was young. He says this very explicitly: "I was kind of a loser and rejected, and look at me now. I am the strongest of them all, and I'm going to make feminazis and zurdos, which is communist, cry. Some possible causes for this gender, and this is what I'm interested in with, and this is what I would like to do the research for. I promise I will do this before we publish the special issue. First of all, there is, in some of the surveys, there seems to be a correlation between participation in any kind of social and community activity and support for Milei. This is a very fascinating book by a political scientist called Javier Balsa, and the book is called Why Did Milei Win? And what he finds is that people that participate regularly in any type of social or public organization, whether it's a political party, a feminist group, a church, a sports club, anything, kids that got together to do skating, whatever, that drops the support for Milei. And of course, the other thing that he finds is that women, and especially young women, participate in this organization much more than young men. So there is an habitus of participating. And also, it's interesting because the young men that support Milei have they report having strong feelings of being isolated, of having no community, and having no identity. And one of the facts that was cited in this very interesting study by Reina Sofia Foundation is that many of the young boys that were interviewed there reported that they kind of resented feminist young women because they felt that feminism had given women an identity that they lacked. And also, I didn't mention this, but there's one of the key findings of Javier Balsa is that a lot of the young boys that relate to Milei relate that they have trouble dating or even approaching women, that they feel that they are going to reject them. And this is a meme that I just came across recently, in which they says the future of dating are robots, right? Instead of like actual women. And you can see this. This is just to show that women have a much higher propensity of participating in collectives. And conversely, Milei voters have a much weaker propensity to participate in collectives. Another interesting thing is that these are all photos of, so you have Milei's photo in the bottom, and at the top you have, these are very recent photos that are pulled out from Twitter of the very massive marches defending public education yesterday. And it was really striking because the president, for example, of the Federal of University Student, the FUA, is a woman, a young woman. I mean, in any photos, you can see that most of these speakers and the faces of the oppositions of groups against Milei are women, and especially young or youngish women. So the gender is not only present in GAP, but it's also who are the faces of Mileism and who are the faces of not Mileism. Second probable cause. Maybe feminism created a kind of imagined community for women, even though the backlash against feminism is real, and many women, as Stephanie and Rodrigo were saying, are kind of uncomfortable with, inclusive language or whatever. There's also a kind of, there's a stickiness, a sense of belonging that makes it harder for them to completely break against the core issues of feminism. Another possible explanation for why there is such a clear gender gap is the responsibilities of caring. And there's a growing body of literature on this topic that says, okay, women tend to be less right-wing because they have to care for people, and if you care for people, then you're more connected to the public spaces, to the world, to schools, to the structures of the welfare state. You're out in the world more, and you have create more solidarity and a more empathetic feeling. Another interesting question that I would like to pursue is, why is there much bigger gender gap in Argentina and not Chile? Actually, a very recent study by Rovira Caldwasser and another group of researchers shows they don't find they don't find a gender gap in votings like we find in Argentina. In votings, not only voting, but ideological positions. Maybe the backlash is stronger in Argentina because the gains of the feminist movement were also stronger, ending in the abortion legalization. Maybe, and this is a hypothesis that I would present, is that the estallido social opened an avenue for a much more gender neutral sense of rebellion. If you were a young boy, you can be rebellious. In Argentina, young boys feel that they have to be rebellious on the right because there aren't many venues for being rebellious on the left today. Maybe social media is structured differently. Argentina, many years now, Argentina has among the highest usages of Twitter and social media in the world. So maybe there's something there. Maybe, and I don't want to be, I don't want to be a party pooper, but maybe Chile will have his own Milei. Because in Argentina, 3-4 years ago, we used to say, oh, this could never happen in Argentina when you looked at Bolsonaro. And guess what? Now Milei is our president. So maybe it's just being situated in different points of the spectrum. You also have to say that this gender gap is very interesting because there is this difference. It's more pronounced in more countries than the other, but you find it in a lot of countries. You find it in Mexico, in the US. The voting difference in young women I was reading is over 25-30 points. In Poland, in a lot of European countries. So I think it's becoming to be one of the fundamental political issues of our time. And just so that we begin closing, this is, I think, my second to last slide. Maybe we need to rethink the definitions of fascism. I don't mean to say that these governments that I'm discussing are fascist, but if you go back to the classic literature of fascism, there's this, like Lipset and even Hannah Arendt. There was this idea that that fascist regimes built on mobilization, of trying to get people into the public square, marching in brown shirts, whatever. And maybe what we're seeing today is a different kind of democratic threat, in which the erosion of democratic feelings is more based on this kind of structure that fosters isolation. And people, especially young boys, the more hours you spend just looking at the screen of your computer and connected to the world through the screen of your computer, is what is more. I don't know. Maybe it would be better if they were marching. At least they would be, in the public space, in a square, and part of a movement. This is what I call matrix fascism, bringing together, political theory and science fiction movies, my two true passions. So, and I don't want to get all Putnamian all of a sudden. I actually 20 years ago wrote a couple of things, kind of criticizing Robert Putnam and the issue of social capital, but maybe we need to go back to that literature and just try to foster engagement in any kind of face-to-face interactive spaces. Maybe women are just more compelled to get into the world more because of their caring responsibilities. Women also seem to enjoy being with others more. even in public spaces. Even public spaces are less safe for women. And I think it's not a coincidence that extreme right-wing governments are now in an offensive, as we see in Argentina, against all types of public spaces. Not just a state, it's not just state reform, it's being against public education, public universities, but also privatizing social and sports clubs, closing down libraries, making public transportation more difficult. It's there's an agenda of a radical shrinking of the public space. So I think we need to maybe think of how can we open participation in any kind of public spaces, really, any kind. It doesn't have to be political. It doesn't have to be leftist. It just needs to be a space where people can meet. Conclusion. And these are the questions that I think political science needs to really grapple with. Can gender be a political cleavage, Lipset and Rokan style? We never thought that this was possible, that you could have a political party for men and a political party broadly supported just by or overwhelmingly by women. So how is that? How is a political system organized around gender as a cleavage even like? What will be the consequences for the political party systems? What also will be the consequences for the private lives? I've had conversations with women literally crying, saying, "My husband voted for Milei. How is this going to impact our life? How is that?" We've discussed this feeling of being rejected by that several young men have. So I think the implications can potentially be quite deep and in ways that we had never thought before. And just to finish, through history, I think you can make the argument that every moment of advancement of gender and diversity rights created its own backlash. You can see this. Now we forget, but anti-gender was also part of the fascist movement discourses of the 30s, of Nazism in Germany, fascism. And again, you can see this in the neoliberal reactions of the 80s, Phyllis Schlafly and all that movement. Can the backlash roll back gains to a historically significant degree? And Silvia Frederici, I was just reading Caliban and the Witch, and this is very concerning because basically she makes the case there that the anti-gender reaction at the end of the medieval years was historically significant. So I hope it's not just a thing of saying, oh, this backlash will pass, it will fade. Maybe it will not fade. Maybe we need more active strategies. Maybe for now we need containment of backlash and more defensive strategies of our sort of public spaces and our types of organizations, and just like holding the fort until the backlash passes. But we need to think of those strategies. And I think, and I hope I made the case, maybe, and I hope to do research in this direction, maybe it's the participation of public spaces and the opening up of these interpersonal spaces that now seem to be quite epistemologically closed, our best bet. And these are the references to the sources cited. Some of the surveys are not public, but I have them, and if anybody is interested, they can find me online, and I'm happy to send them.
Thanks a lot, Maria Esperanza. Very interesting presentation. Next presentation, it's on Michelle Haffeman. Michelle is a PhD candidate on political science at the Pontifical Catholic University here in Chile. He's interested in research method and comparative politics, and she studied gender and politics. Michelle's presentation is titled Far Right and Anti-Feminism, the Case of the Republicano Party of Chile. I think it's a presentation that fits very well, very connected with the others. So it's up to you, Michelle.
Thank you. Let's see if we can see the presentation. Should be soon here. Great. Thanks a lot. Well, thanks a lot for the invitation. Also for the organizers to do this effort, because it's very interesting and enriching to join other researchers studying the same or asking themselves the same questions. What I'm presenting now is part of my thesis research, mainly the theoretical frame, the design, and some preliminary findings. Okay. So, oh, 1 second. Well, I will pass very fast through this, because I think we have established what is a far-right party, right? The main feature of a far-right party is this belief in in a natural order that is based in inequalities. Also, the opposition against non-traditional gender norms, that is, every norm that becomes a threat or plays a threat to a traditional gender order. And for all of this, and what I'm gonna show you in a few slides more, they have been labeled as anti-feminist parties. Okay, what do we know until now about anti-feminism? How can we define it, right? There are several definitions, and mainly they come from social psychology. First of all, this opposition or rejection against non-traditional gender norms, especially those that are part of the demands of the feminist movement, okay? Also, this denial and opposition at the same time to the persistent inequality that affects women in a sense of a collective group in society. This is called also by the literature of anti-feminism as post-feminism. The sympathy for the traditional family structure is one of the features of anti-feminism that is being signed or has been stated by the literature about anti-feminism. And finally, the reaction of feminist mobilization, the organization of women in the feminist movement, and the promotion of this feminine individual awareness or the feminist consciousness at the end. Okay. So the case also, I will pass very fast because I think that Stephanie and Rodrigo presented it very well. We have here the Republicano Party, right, founded by José Antonio Caz in the picture, that for the researchers and scholars that have been studying this case and also on other cases in Latin America, qualifies as a far-right party and places in the political ideological spectrum in Chile at the right of the conventional right, the traditional right parties we had in the Chilean system after the transition to democracy in the 90s. Also, information we have so far about Republicano voters show that from the demands, from the demand side, the side of the voters, these voters also share positions and attitudes against non-traditional gender norms, and they have an homogeneous discourse based in principles as family, homeland, and security. So this makes the Republicano Party a shrine for this kind of voters that are against liberal policies, between them feminist policies, also in the sense of what Masur defines a feminist policy. Also, very briefly, but just to state the phenomenon of the Republicano Party, this is a party founded by a former deputy from the Unión Demócrata Independiente, José Antonio Caz, that split from the party in 2016. Formed in the first place a movement, a social movement called Acción Republicana. Then in June 2019, the Republicano Party as having the movement as a base, became an organization, and legally in 2021 it became a party legally recognized in the Chilean system. And that very first year, the party won its first seats in the Congress, and presented a few candidates to the first constitutional process in Chile, and won also a couple representatives. In 2021, the same year of the founding of the party, Cast was a presidential candidate in the presidential election, and went into ballotage with Boric. As we know, he lost the ballotage, Boric becoming the president, but Cast got almost 45% of the votes in the second wave of the presidential election. Then 2 years later, in 2023, the Republicano Party became the main force in the second part of the constitutional process, and one of its representatives, the Professor Luis Silva, as he's known, was the national majority between the voting of the election. At the same time, and this is, I will explain later why I'm doing this chronological review. It's very important to take or to have in mind that Chile has always been a latecomer when it comes to gender norms. Okay, Chile was one of the countries that adopted or established women vote in the second wave of the women enfranchisement in Latin America. Also, it's one of the latest countries in Latin America to adopt gender norms as quota laws. But in this history of incremental, very, very slow, but incremental gender change or institutional change in Chile, we had a little bit of an acceleration from the first period of presidency of Michelle Bachelet, but especially what some literature has been calling a window of feminist opportunity between the second period of Michelle Bachelet and 2024, this year. In 2014, Michelle Bachelet started her second period as a president, and from 2015 and on, several amount of political policies addressing feminist issues and also gender issues in general were discussed in Congress, and as you can see here, very important ones were adopted and became law. First of all, the creation of the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality, the gender quota law, the law that establishes special funding from the state to women that are candidates in elections, the three causes abortion law. Then we had a national feminist mobilization in 2018 to understand this window of feminist opportunity of the last decade. The social uprising in 2019, where the feminist movement had a very relevant role and was very present during the mobilizations, and the gender parity and feminist participation, especially in the first part of the constitutional process, and gender parity in the second part of the constitutional process. Why I am saying this? Because my research is located in what Lenka Bustikova called the theory of minority accommodation. What she saw in the study of several countries in Western Europe was that far-right parties hold positions against political groups when these political groups come from the margins to the mainstream of the political system. In this case, what I am seeing, or what I hypothesize, is that far-right parties, especially the Republicano Party, hold anti-feminist positions because they react in a negative way to the accommodation of feminists within the political system, within the state, and this is seen as a political threat to the natural gender order, so it becomes a main political issue and programmatic issue for them. Why I insist in this idea of feminism as a political threat, and not only a gender or cultural threat, because in the logic of this theory of Bastikova, in difference of the cultural backlash theory, instead of a group hostility, there is a political hostility. And this political hostility is a key driver of far-right mobilization. I am very fan of the idea also because it allows us to research feminism as a political actor. And I think that this has been understated so far, or under-researched so far, between political party research and also institutional research. So here we have a party that becomes an anti-feminist party because anti-feminism is a political relevant actor. So this party also works in a logic of counter-mobilization, political counter-mobilization, not only driven by resentment, but driven by the threat that these policy changes mean to this natural gender order. I will skip this one that is also giving more detail about the theory to go to this part. In the logic of the Bastikova theory, that I think that should for me it fits very well what I'm seeing on my field work on the preliminary findings of my research. You should understand, or I should understand, that we have our political referent, in this case the Frente Amplio, the party from the actual president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, that define itself as a feminist political party. So in reaction to this, the Republicano Party defines itself as anti-feminist party. And you will see later in some quotes from the interviews I'm carrying right now that they understand that they have been labeled as this, and also they express that they have a clear opposition to feminism as a political referent. Also, what is very interesting about this theory of Bastikova is that the reaction against feminism as a political referent and the reaction against the accommodation of feminists within the state and within the political system is manifested in 3 stages. During the discussion of a law, then during the implementation of a law, and what Bastikova calls the post-reform stage. So they are opposing feminist policy that has been adopted before the party was founded, for example, the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality, the abortion law, and some others that I will show you now. So my main research question then is how the Republicano Party of Chile is an anti-feminist party, okay? So in other words, how in perspective of the minority accommodation theory, it opposes, resists, or reacts to feminist accommodation within the Chilean political system. I will pass also very briefly through my research design, methodological design, and carrying on a qualitative research design based on previous experience of qualitative research of the far right. And what I'm planning, what I'm aiming to do is to understand in the words of the own members of the elites of the party, how do they identify the feminist movement? How do they think the party should react to the feminist policy? What are they thinking the party should do so they can explain their own anti-feminist strategies? and understand all of this within what is their interpretation of the social reality, because here we have a strong narrative about threat, about this feminist movement and all of the left in Chile, right? Being a threat to this traditional order that the country had until somewhere in our history, and that is what motivates. And it's very interesting to hear people saying in their own words how they never had experience in politics and then came into the party or joined the party because they were motivated by these issues. So to go to maybe the most important part, the preliminary findings. Well, as I said, this qualitative research design is based in previous research, qualitative research done mainly in Europe of far-right parties. And these previous experiences say, for example, that interviews with party elites are very relevant because most of the time the documents use a more neutral language or try to soften the discourse against feminism and against gender in their official documents, official statements, even websites, and all that is in a public domain. So here we have the document of that it is presented to establish legally the party. This is not a public document. You have to ask. It's public, but it's not published. You have to ask for it through the transparency law. And in this document, what is very interesting is that in the first point of the declaration of the party, of its interest and its philosophy, or you can call it its ideological definition, it's the rejection of abortion and the compromise of the party with life from the very first moment of its conception. What is I would call a religious or maybe a moral rejection of abortion. But also checking on the legislative documents from the congressmen and women from the party from 2021 until now, you can see that gender issues are one of the main issues that motivate bills and legislation proposals. And so far they have presented 5 bills, either to ban abortion, the 3 causes abortion law, to change one of the causes, to modify one of the causes, or to eliminate one of the causes, and even to add some requisites to for women to access to abortion in the logic of these 3 causes abortion law. For example, here we have one of the projects that establish the mandatory request of an ultrasound to women that are pregnant. And I'm sorry that I'm saying this. I'm not inventing. I wish I was inventing, but I'm not, because they think that if women listen to the heartbeats of the fetus, so they could reconsider abortion. The thing is that this is not an original idea from the Republicano Party. Bolsonaro did the same in Brazil, and Orban did the same in Hungary just before. So it connects to also was what Maria Esperanza was saying, this idea of a liberal script that is passing between the far-right parties. Okay, so far I have carried 32 interviews with party elites. I am focusing exclusively in party elites to understand from the supply side how this opposition to anti-feminism articulates, and how could I define anti-feminism in a political party logic, starting in this case specifically from the Republicano Party. I've been carrying interviews with a very neutral questionnaire or with very neutral questions. But one of the first questions I asked to the elites is what made them join the party, and it's impressive that the first spontaneous reason they quote is the rejection to abortion. So when they are asked why did they join this far right party, most of them, I would say the total of the people I have interviewed so far, say that it was because they reject abortion, and also because they reject the social uprising of 2019. Those are the main ideational or maybe ideological issues that got these people into the party. I won't read the quotes. You can read here. The second one is very interesting because it was an interview carried after the presidential address from June 1st, when the President Boric announced a presentation of a non-cost abortion law, a free abortion law, and all of the congressmen and women from the Republican Party stood and left the room. What is interesting about the interviews for me so far? Also because in the interviews you could see clearly strategies to oppose feminism as a political actor. And this opposition is not only an electoral opposition, not only in programmatic proposals or in a program platform, it's also a cultural strategy. So these kind of parties, and especially the Republicano Party, understand that there is an electoral battle and there is a cultural battle. So that's why we are listening so repeatedly in Latin America about the batalla cultural, the cultural battle. What is and also an interesting finding, I think, about this for this case is that, this is the idea of a cultural battle in the case of Chile is not new. This idea of having groups within the social society, the civil society, right, carrying a cultural work was one of the main points of the gremialismo, the gremialist movement founded by Jaime Guzmán, one of the main collaborators, civil collaborators of Pinochet, killed in 1991 as a senator from the UDI, the Unión Demócrata Independiente, and what keeps on coming up through the interviews is the idea that they are recovering Guzman project of society, and this project of society understand that there has to be a stage of intermediate bodies, social organizations body that carry the work or connect the work from the party to the society. And these bodies are the ones in charge of the cultural work. So a few more findings from the interviews. The idea that the party is very intelligent to learn from its mistakes. In the last presidential campaign, there was a big polemic here in Chile because one of the proposals from José Antonio Caz was to ban the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality. Well, we know the case from Argentina that Milei already did that, but here they now learned that worked against them. So they are in the interviews they are saying, we won't say we will eliminate the ministry anymore, but at the point we get into government, we are going to eliminate the Ministry of Women and also move on banning the abortion law. Also, they are very clear that they are being labeling as machistas or anti-feminist or anti-gender. and they know that they don't have a big constituency between women from the age to 18 to 40 years old. They have been carrying some strategies to grow within women electors, but they think, some of them, as you see in the quote, that there's a group of women they won't be able to reach because these women are feminists. Although it's very interesting, and I had the chance to talk with Sonia Correa about this, it's important to understand that this is not an anti-women party. It's a pro-women party from their point of view, and that is important because they are trying to change the narrative about what a woman is, what women demands are, and what priorities in public policy for women should be. So they call themselves a pro-women party, and they even say that there's no party more concerned about women issues that they are. So final remarks. Through the interviews, I've gathered very rich data about what would you say these anti-feminist strategies are, or how do they define these anti-feminist strategies? How do they see feminism as a political threat and a political relevant actor situated on the left, of course? They are very clear, do not hesitate to say they oppose feminism, and at the same time, you can understand from their own words how do they see the party should work in the electoral arena, while social organizations are working right now in the social arena to promote this cultural change that will back up the electoral success of the party. So that's it so far. I'm willing to hear all the comments, and thanks a lot for the opportunity. Here I leave you my contact in case you want to reach me.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for all your presentations. It's very interesting how, in some way, the polarized discourse and autocratic positions regarding power and leadership are increased by fears. Fears of losing a dominant position in society in relation to migrants, women, or in economic terms, fear of exposure to war, as Sophie present very, very well. We will now open the floor for questions. I think we have some pending questions to be answered from our previous panel. And I'm not sure if we have now some pending question at the chat. Okay. So yeah, I think Stephanie wants to make a question. Yeah. No, she's leaving. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. We will stay in contact. Actually, I have a question based on your. It's an open question. I mean, Michelle, Esperanza, Rocio, Isil. It's open for all of you. I think Sophie is still the floor there in Paris. I'm not sure. Well, based on your research, if this backlash is due to fears, what kind of reaction do you predict from this group, those who are now being excluded and persecuted, like we women feel or feminists feel in those countries? I know.
Well, that's a great question. And thanks for posing it, because I felt that I should have said something, which is that in a way, I don't know if it's correct to use the term backlash, because I thought about this listening to Michelle's presentation, and that's why, for example, I refuse to call these movements conservative, because they are not conservative. It's not about saying, okay, the changes have gone too far, we need to come back to the previous status quo. It's about creating a new status quo in many ways. These ultrasound laws, this wasn't the status quo before. Actually, for example, if you look at the US, the anti-abortion prohibitions that are now being put in place are much more stringent than the pre-1972 status quo. No, there are states in which you cannot treat a woman that is bleeding to death due to an incomplete miscarriage, which is something that you could totally do in 1972. So in many ways, yes, it's a backlash, but it's not conservative. It's about going, I think, in some aspects of the discourse, it's about creating a society that wasn't necessarily what was before this kind of feminist gains. It's the same in Argentina. In Argentina, we've had the famous tres causales, the three causes. We've had them since 1921. That was the status quo for over a century. Now there's a discourse that says we need to go even beyond that. Having said, now what are the oppressed groups going to do? When one of the things that you can say that they are doing is voting against these movements. And just out of the top of my head, the women's vote is now the base of the Democratic Party in the U.S. Women, as I said, in Argentina were the bulk of the non-Milei vote. Now it's hard for me to say. Just to finish, now, do I believe that that is a stable form of political cleavages? I am not convinced of that. As I said, I am not convinced that you can have a political party that it's a man's party and a party that it's a woman's party. I don't know. And the other thing I feel is that in many ways, or at least what I see in Argentina, is that also women, this is not a very scientific comment that I'm going to say, but women are we are very used to sort of try to negotiate and compromise and use indirect strategies. I also cannot see happening like a very politicized women's movement. I don't know. Actually, if you look at some of the surveys and the qualitative, you find that this, especially in the more popular classes, these women that are pro-Milei that are anti-Milei are not pro-Milei, are not necessarily going out and doing politics, because it's not something that you do so openly. You go into the booth vote, and you vote. But maybe that's what we need to. But if the men in your family are pro-Milei, maybe you're not going to do it openly. So I think that's why it's important to connect the research on the more like political sciencey public stuff, and how the forms in which this is affecting the more daily lives of communities and families.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to answer more from my point of view, that in a scientific way, following that comment from Esperanza, Maria Esperanza also. I think that, first of all, but this is more, maybe comes more from my research. First of all, we have to understand that here, and I keep listening to this, and that here we don't have a group of people that are all fanatics, or maybe don't are out of the normal. We have what I see, we have very normal people, standard people that react in this way to feminists advance and that are building strategies. So it's not like something out of the blue. Here we have in Chile also a continuity from the presence of these groups, as Stephanie and also Rodrigo considering in the research that finds a political reference in this party in the first place. So we have to understand that how serious is the work they are doing.
Mhm.
On the second place, I think, and I like very much from the presentation from Maria Esperanza, is the relevance of gender as a cleavage. I think that maybe we should be talking about a gender cleavage because I'm not doing a comparative research now. My idea would be to compare with other cases in Latin America, but from the data we have, we can see that one dimension that is constant between the far-right parties in Latin America is the opposition against the non-traditional gender norms. Some other dimensions they vary between them, immigration, anti-immigration, discourse, or neoliberal, conservative economic policy, but not a position against non-traditional gender norms is a constant between the parties. And what I see between the elites is also a position that doesn't vary. If between the voters, as we know, and also my thesis supervisor, Cristobal Rovira, had a presentation of some data some days ago, we could see that between voters, we have a variation. Some voters also between the far right don't oppose to abortion. Between the elites, there is no variation when it comes to opposition to non-traditional gender norms. And some last 2 points, the social space. I think that and this is a personal point of view, I think that one of the things they are doing very well is building communities. And I think that the left here in Chile got away or is far from the social space that was a main feature from the left in the country. They have developed the ability to gather people, to make people, to frame people within these frames of sense, as you will call in collective action theory. And also when it comes to feminism, I think that maybe we should think from feminism, how do we go back to the social space and regain that path that they have been working very, very well. And the last point is the fundamental role of the conventional right. If the conventional right, as we have seen in Chile in the last years, keeps its moderation, keeps backing up feminist policy, I think we are still in a safe space. But the moment they assume that electorally, because in a logic of rational election point of view, when they assume it's better to move to the right and to get back to conservative positions against non-traditional gender norms that they had before in Chile at least, then we will have some the threat of the building of a larger coalition, and that would
Like
be
Argentina.
Yeah, exactly. That will be a really much bigger issue, I think.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Maria Esperanza. I think Maricel is having a question from the floor in Paris. I think the microphone is
Yes.
open. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Lucia. I put it on the chat, but I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, it's a question for all the presentations. Thank you very much, because I think they're really interesting, and there is a lot of points of common with the presentations in Paris, we discussed later. So my question is about the what I think is interesting is the explanation of the differences between women, for instance, supporting far rights political parties in Argentina and in Chile. I understood that the social class are not having the same role as before, but I think Maria Esperanza Casullo says that there is a kind of class crossed impact of the class, the social class, and I would like to know more about that, because I think that the social class is affecting this kind of identification with the far right parties in Argentina and Chile, and I would like to know a little bit more about that. And understood that it's not with the ideology of those parties, but my question is if there is some differences between women and between men, and how social class is explaining or not articulated with gender, is explained or not this identification. Well, I hope it's clear. Thank you.
Great question, thanks. And I'm not sure I have a good answer to that. What I do know is that it's very clear that Milei was able to win with 55% of the vote in the second vote round because he was able to create a coalition that was largely class cross-cutting for classes. In a country like Argentina, in which there was a strong class component to voting, with always with grace, but the vote for Peronism was highly correlated with the more popular classes, and the vote, especially the vote for Mauricio Macri and Juntos por el Cambio, was bigger in middle classes and in the upper classes. Milei was successful electorally, I think, for two things. First of all, because he, and I was thinking about this as Michelle was speaking, what was a key in Milei's victory in the second round was Mauricio Macri's support, which legitimated the movement for middle class, upper class, especially, and people over 65 years old, retirees, it legitimized, or it created a permission structure for them for voting for Milei. Milei got 25% of the vote, and 29 and 29, something like that, 27 and 29 in the first two rounds. And then he exploded to 55%. But the interesting thing is that he also was able to win because he was able to get parts of the traditional working class vote for Peronism. It actually won in the more peripheral areas of the countries where there are strongholds of Peronism. It won with almost 60% or over 60% in Patagonia. It won in the Northwest and the Northeast, which are very historically the poorer areas of Argentina. So, he was able to fish votes from high up, but also from low down. And in the case of this core, and Rocio mentioned this is not all of Milei's vote. Milei vote was heterogeneous in many ways, but the core of the emotional beating heart of the movement and these young men. And this group of young men that are truly sort of committed Mileistas are found in all the classes. You have these Mileista young men in poor working neighborhood, in middle class families, and in upper middle class families. And it's interesting because I don't have the figures in my head, but women are slightly or are less mileistas or slightly less mileistas also in all the classes, but they are even less mileistas in working class communities now and in middle class families. And now because of you can see that the Milei's movement against retirees pensions, it's also diminished his support in women over 65. So I would say that largely the gender gap exists in all the classes, but it's clearly modulated by class. It's a stronger or weaker in different classes and different groups. Popular women who are raising children and are, more in charge of feeding their families, dealing with crumbling public hospitals, dealing with, that would be my explanation, are less convinced of the sustainability of the Milei experiment. But I also want to say that you find this core of young men sharing the same memes, the same posts, with the same language in a working class neighborhood in Neuquén, where I'm in like deep Patagonia, in a rich neighborhood in San Isidro. There's a striking cross-class component of Milei's reach to these young men.
Thank you, Maria Esperanza. I think that Reyes Filadoro and Quet in Argentina evaluate the relation between, it's just for Buenos Aires, but take in account the socio-economic level and the level of support to Massa, Milei, and we can find that even among the Massa voters, there were a very low evaluation of the Massa performance during the campaign. It's quite tricky, this relation. Is there any other question yeah, sorry.
But I think that from the voters, Rodrigo should, but I don't know if he's still online, because I could check from the elites, from the supply side. What I'm seeing is that women are a lot less between the elites, and also they have a large evangelical Christian vote. Between that evangelical vote, they have women voting for them, and evangelical women are subrepresented between the elites. But the difference, I would say, more than a class difference, there's a background difference. Most of the men come from other political parties, and most of women come from social organizations. Yeah, some of them, from my interviews, come from pro-life organizations and more conservative NGOs, and they joined motivated, as I said, for this rejection against abortion and also the social uprising. What is interesting, just anecdotically, is that when it comes to discuss gender issues, women in the interviews are much upfront than men. Maybe it's a gender bias because I am a women interviewer, so men try to soften the discourse, are more neutral, and women are not neutral, or they are very upfront and very even it's surprising how rough they are when they talk about feminism and gender issues.
Thank you. Is there any other question or intervention, comments in Paris? No? We can hear you. No, we can hear you, Maricel. No, no.
No.
No, ahora sí. Yeah. Go on.
No, there are no more questions here.
Okay.
No more,
Well,
no more questions.
Thank you. So I believe the most relevant and interesting topics regarding autocratic leadership and the politicization of gender in Latin America, Asia, and Europe have been covered. Thanks a lot, all of you, panelists, attendees, both virtual and in person. I believe we have a lot of valuable material to move forward with a special issue as after this workshop. I don't know, Maricel, if you have some final words.
Yes, simply thank you very much to all of you. You understand me, for your participation in person and online, and special thanks to our international guests. And this workshop, just remember that it was organized by the Research Committee on Political Sociology of the International Sociological Association and the International Political Science Association, and in partnership with Flaxo and the Faculty of Social Sciences, Economy and Law of the Institut Catholique de Paris. So many thanks to all the persons that who contributed to this workshop. It's all.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
It was great.
Bye, thank you.
So,
Thank you very
bye,
much,
Kathy.
Lucia.
Bye, Rocío. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Chao.
Bye.
Muchas gracias, Jan, Antonia,